Would you put it past me if I told you I kind of regret trying to run a comedy news show this week? I was sort of hoping things would quiet down and I could focus on some of the positive developments from the last few weeks. Did you know a team out of Boulder, Colorado debuted a revolutionary new shelf-stable single-jab rabies vaccine 2 weeks ago? They did, and it's rather hard to make fun jokes about candy-coated vaccines while also having to report on the actions of ICE and Israel. Not even for the tonal whiplash, I can separate those into different show segments to work around that, but it's damn hard to not worry. Could the time I spent on that vaccine story have been better spent on something more pressing? I don't know about y'all, but I need some shit to say sane? Personally, while not working, I've been playing a bunch of video games, mostly Hades 2 and Digimon Time Stranger, and tormenting some puppy girls who are doing Locktober. What about y'all? Woof. While you answer that, welcome to Muttday Morning News. I'm the titular Mutt Fen, so let's get to some news. Here's my basic plan for this week. Fascism, AI cruft, and then mostly petty fandom drama, so let's get going. The US federal government has officially been shut down since midnight Tuesday night, but hey, do you know why? There's a few reasons, but the big one is because Trump and the GOP's budget plan will destroy our already garbage healthcare infrastructure, and for once, Dems kind of held the line. See, Schumer and Jeffries actually tried to have a meeting with Trump 2 weeks ago, which Trump canceled. Then last week, the GOP House membership actually just ran out instead of getting to work on any kind of sustainable budget. The hope obviously being that they could blame the Democrats for the shutdown, ignoring, of course, that the GOP control the House, the Senate, most of the courts, and the executive branch. See, key issue is that's not the only reason why those Republican House members ran away. On September 23rd, Adelita Grijalva won the Arizona special election to fill the House seat her father died in earlier this year. Grijalva, a Democrat, has already pledged to be the final 218th vote necessary to open the Epstein Files, along with 4 GOP House members who've already agreed to the proposition. But that would require the GOP House members actually return so that the session can reach quorum. Notably, Mike Johnston has also been hiding from her because that way he doesn't have to actually swear her in as a House member. My notes for this section quite literally started with, "The General's meeting was only on Wednesday?" This meeting was so blisteringly stupid, I'm not even sure what to say about it. Pete Hegseth came out on stage to talk at, again, every general and admiral in the United States military, and he thought the best way to approach them was with summer youth pastor vibes, crossed with I have a big announcement tech bro energy, and then he threw some weirdly wooden Trump mannerisms too, just to make it really obvious when he was thinking way too hard about his stage directions. It did not work. He was clearly going for a paternal authority figure vibe, but when the room is full of folks 20 plus years your senior, many of whom are extremely aware of Hegseth's own record, it was clear the audience understood, as Hegseth does not, modern warfare has as little to do with how many push-ups a given general can do as beards have on combat effectiveness, Hegseth's other bugaboo. While he tries to play it off as a focus on aesthetics, still a needless and entirely personal concern, it's simply overt racism. Hegseth demands these regular daily shaving requirements, which anyone with curly facial hair, a much more common occurrence for those not Caucasians, know exactly what I'm talking about. Overshaving of the variety that Hegseth is demanding of service members causes anyone with, say, curly black hair to have to deal with hair growing back into their face and causing many, many serious issues. And instead of the rules that we've had in place since 2010, allowing most soldiers to get some kind of dispensation to simply not shave as regularly and maintain a well-kept beard, Hegseth has decided that no, they get one singular annual waiver, essentially, that lasts for 1 year, and if you still require a waiver at the end of that period, you will be administratively separated from the United States Army. Look, I'm a leftist, and I have many varied issues with the military, but so long as it exists, yeah, I'm gonna care about the folks being illegally and obviously discriminated against, while Men like Hegseth are trying to use pathetic white boy grooming as an excuse to remove people of color. And let's be honest here. Men of color, since he's already removed trans folks despite never needing to convince us trans girls to shave, and his hope announced at this very meeting that he'd be able to get women back out of the military as well. I'll remind you that many of the generals and admirals at this meeting were women, but sure. Amusingly, the next section of my notes also started with a, well, silly note. Kash Patel is a fupping idiot, which sort of blends nicely in with the section following it. The conservative cracks are beginning to show, so I figured I'd just sort of blend them together because they work real well. I've mentioned the whole Rouse thing a few times, or how he spent a week having a public and really pathetic tantrum in front of the Senate, but this probably takes the cake. First, this week, Patel was giving out these challenge coins to top FBI members. I don't really have a lot to say about them because what the hell would I even say? They're the sort of thing an edgy 13-year-old boy with a cop for a dad would make if you asked him to make a police challenge badge, and then he never stopped designing it until he was... Wait, what do you mean Patel is 45? That makes this part even dumber. See, this week, we also learned from AP News that back in July, Patel was opening the first FBI field office in Aotearoa, specifically in Wellington. There's two major wrinkles here. One, the local media were intentionally kept in the dark about the new office of a U.S. intelligence agency setting up in their backyard. Two, Patel decided to gift several Aotearoan officials challenge coin display stands, which contained so-called ghost guns, essentially 3D printed pistols with only a few missing pieces needed to make them functional. They're not strictly illegal in Aotearoa. Going about the criminalization of an unregisterable firearm is sort of its own special headache, but the country does treat them the same as functional pistols, which require both firearm certification and an additional pistol certification as well. While it's unclear if any of the officials had such a certification or why Patel thought it would be an appropriate gift, but in the interest of caution, the display stands containing the ghost guns from a foreign spy agency were destroyed. I also mentioned further conservative infighting. Patel's been spearheading some of those as well. This week, the FBI, at Patel's order, severed ties with the Anti-Defamation League, also known as the ADL, after Elon Musk, owner of Kash Patel's favorite website, I know that sounds like a joke, but that was the one serious line in this story, raised a stink about something the ADL had said. See, on paper, the ADL are a watchdog organization intended to curb rising anti-Semitism in the US. For the last decade and change, they've actually been more about pushing the false conflation of anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism. They've been a fairly reliable ally of US conservatives until they have something critical to say about Israel, or if they actually slip into overt anti-Semitism rather than the more diffuse hatred for diaspora Jews Israel's been rather heavily cultivating. Which is why the late Charlie Kirk, who often slipped into overt anti-Semitism, especially as he tried to court groypers in the last few months of his life, appeared on the ADL's glossary of extremism and hate for a little while. Until Musk noticed, and having nothing better to do, started whining about it. While Patel did not directly cite Elon's tantrum, he did say former director Comey, a once Trump faithful, sent love letters to the organization, while also accusing the org of disgraceful ops spying on Americans, and also said the FBI won't partner with political fronts masquerading as watchdogs. Again, I'd like to make a joke about that too, but until writing this story, I kind of forgot the ADL used to pretend to be a watchdog. While I'm reminding you of other conservatives that all hate each other, do you remember Rush Limbaugh? If you're around my age, which according to my YouTube statistics is pretty likely, he was the big conservative commentator when we were coming up. He died a few years back and basically ceased to matter. Nothing he'd said or done lasted after the second he was cold in the ground. Do you even know when he died? Or what of? This is my job and I had to go look it up. And to my shock, he only died 4 years ago, back in 2021, of lung cancer, after denying for years the cigars he loved were dangerous. Well, for comparison, here's the graph of how often Google users searched for Charlie Kirk in the past month. As illegally federalized National Guard continue to harass USians in California, Memphis, and, well, they wield firearms in the martial crackdown on DC, and act as ICE and DHS support staff in several states, they were blocked from Oregon twice over the weekend. First, on Saturday, the president attempted to federalize the Oregonian Guard against the state's government and were blocked by Judge Immergut, a Trump appointee, for its blatant illegality. On Sunday, the Trump admin attempted to circumvent the order by sending the already federalized troops from California to Portland, to which the state of Oregon filed another restraining order against the action, and was joined by the state of California. Additionally, on Sunday night, Hegseth issued a memorandum purporting to, again, illegally federalize 400 members of the Texas National Guard for deployment to Chicago and Portland. At a hearing over the new orders late Sunday night, Judge Immergut almost immediately and repeatedly had to remind the DOJ representatives that they were officers of the court and bound to enforce its rules, and they had been openly admitting to circumventing and violating her court order, as her order said nothing of the troops' source, but that the conditions in Portland in no way warranted National Guard, much less against the wishes of the state government. Judge Immergut maintained her standing order that National Guard were not warranted in Portland, but issued a second order specifically blocking deployment of any federalized troops to Oregon for the next 14 days. Chicago, on the other hand, continues to get the rough end of the stick. ICE, ATF, and CBP have all been particularly active, though J.B. Pritzler's big talk he set the city and state cops to the Broadview facility has been very helpful. As anyone who's been paying attention for any amount of time can tell you, they promptly set up free speech zones in the year of our Mutt 2025, then proceeded to stand shoulder to shoulder with federal agents as they charged, beat, and kidnapped Chicagoans. Even those who stood behind the illegal free speech barricades outside the illegal fence ICE threw up on a public street 2 weeks ago. It's been sad to see Pritzler prove to the rest of the country what trans folks already kind of knew about the billionaire, that he won't put his money where his mouth is. If you're not aware, while he made comments about Illinois coming together to support trans folks, the largest hospital network in the metropolis cut off trans healthcare the same week, and he's done nothing about it. Now he's sent state and city cops ostensibly to protect protesters, but as we all know, all cops are bastards. And let's not forget about ICE and DHS's love of sizzle reels of crying women and children. In the wee hours of September 30th, the Department of Homeland Security forces assaulted an apartment in the South Shore neighborhood of Chicago. Agents descended upon the small building from every direction, including the roof. ICE apparently needed a new supercut of their cruelty, since the helicopters that dropped said unnecessary roof teams were obviously filming the whole event. It was apparently very important to ICE agents that they get lots of footage of the naked women and children they dragged from their homes before separating families and loading them onto trucks to be banished. Some of the detainees have been released, but no one can even get a clear answer out of how many people ICE took to understand how many have been released. All of this the day before Hegseth and Trump referred to the Democratic cities as military training grounds. Federal agents were also caught choking out a black man on camera and shot a woman in Brighton Park before spinning an absurd tale about a 10-car incident that justified firing on a civilian before she drove herself to the hospital to get care for wounds, according to a DHS spokeswoman. I don't think I've ever read a more American statement than that in my life, though it was topped by the fact that a spokesperson for the Chicago Fire Department immediately ran counter to it, saying that they actually took the woman 2 miles to a local hospital. The shooting sparked off a massive protest, which the DHS naturally responded to with a bog bank of tear gas. Did I mention that the shooting and tear gassing took place by a elementary school? Yeah, they tear gassed an elementary school. Not only are these monsters kidnapping people off the streets and daring to complain about Nazi comparison, they're tear gassing elementary school children as a matter of course. I will again remind you that using tear gas on opposing forces violates the Geneva Conventions. They just don't apply when you're doing it to your own citizenry. Last bit in the fascism news, I am not going to be covering any of the stuff about the Sumud Flotilla, the potential ceasefire, the return of the hostages, or any of that this week. The reports of what Israel is doing to the flotilla members, again, for trying to provide food and medical supplies, was just more than I could personally handle, and the story on all fronts is still developing, so I don't feel comfortable reporting any kind of current status that will likely have changed by the time I put this video out. There have been sweeping strikes in Italy in response to the flotilla's capture, illegal capture I will also add, as well as in the Netherlands and Turkey. So let's move on to the AI slop news, because at least that's easier to make fun of. The Anthropic case is back in the news, and it still sucks. Turns out the lawyers running it got a nice payout, but everyone else kinda humped. The case is paying out, but only if your book was copied and registered specifically with the US Copyright Office. Nearly all non-US authors are excluded. As a bit of extra salt in the wound, those whose work were included in anthologies also get no compensation. Only the person who registered the book's ISBN with the US Copyright Office can get any kind of payout. That might not sound like a ton, but understand that the Anthropic AI's training data is effectively every book that's ever been released in English in human history. If they actually had to pay for the massive volume of work they stole and will still be allowed to profit from for some reason, they'd have burned their entire venture capital startup money pile, and we just can't have that for our big, precious godhead chatbot. Not to be outdone, Sam Altman's ChatGPT, responsible for at least one murder-suey, launched its new video engine Sora, and okay, this thing is actually kind of impressively the death knell of the AI bubble. Speaking of which, per a report out of MarketWatch, the bubble itself is 17 times the size of the dot-com burst and 4 times the subprime loan crash that nearly destroyed the entire global economy. Don't worry, I didn't forget about the whole Sora being a death knell. Well, when you look at it from, let's say, a wider perspective, acknowledging that all of these companies have their own generative video systems, why is Sora that much worse? Well, there's a couple of issues. First of all, they obviously all work well enough. They can fool the dictator of my country. And not that that's saying very much, it's still enough. They also cost a lot of money. Take Veo 3, Google's newest version of their video engine. It's actually a bit difficult to parse how much using any of these tools costs because they're all built like scams, but at face value, to get constant access to Veo 3, it's going to cost you about $250 a month, plus 40 cents per second of video generated, or 15 cents if you're using Veo 3 Fast. They're lower quality, basically. Sora videos, by contrast, can currently be generated for free, and based on data from previous versions of Sora, though it's safe to assume that those are now lowball estimates for the updated version, cost $5 each to make, as they have a fixed 8-second length. The key is, that's the cost to OpenAI, not the consumer. OpenAI threw their generative video engine into the ring because it's all they have to try and stay relevant, which is also why they had to make it free. Even if it does its job and hooks millions of users, OpenAI's own profitability benchmarks require that they hit and maintain more than 2 billion paid users. And that was before they introduced Sora. They literally need 1/4 of humanity to buy their product on a constant monthly basis in perpetuity to make a single dollar more than the service costs to run. Oh, and their weird intent to get sued out of existence. I forgot about this part too, because that's tied in with Sora. OpenAI has decided that it was in their power to demand all copyright holders need to come to them to opt out of reproduction of their work. Okay, I need to stress that, this is the entire reason why copyright laws were invented in the 1400s. Specifically so that you didn't need to go hunt down every random weirdo who'd managed to figure out a printing press and say, no, you don't have legal permission just by default to use my property, you melon. Fun aside, since Google's absolute destruction of their own search engine with AI, they've run into a fun new issue. Namely, if you try and search, "Is Trump showing signs of dementia?" Well, that's actually the only search that properly functions on the site right now. Because instead of returning an AI-generated answer, it instead shows you a Wikipedia article on pretty much that, and especially the Newsweek article on how they're specifically blocking that phrase from being searched with their AI search engine. There's not even really a thing here. This is mostly just Why? Maybe you shouldn't have put the LLM on top of your search engine because it just makes stuff up. Weirdly, this does kind of prove that there's evidence to that point, though, so good job. This one is less important, more just kind of stupid, and since I had to read about it, I'm inflicting it on you too. Amazon Luna, the cloud gaming service I keep forgetting they've been running since 2022, is getting some unique titles all on its own. They're mostly slot party games, but one managed to sink even deeper into the trough by being an AI game where you and your friends practice improv before a courtroom homunculus claiming to be an AI facsimile of Snoop Dogg. I don't actually know what the point of this one is. It just feels like a strange choice personally, but then I'm not an Amazon executive paid to slap AI Snoop Dogg, exploding kittens, and the simultaneously ontologically tainted and low mid as hell turf wizard game into a streaming service in a bundle and act like it makes any sense. Which, yeah, they added that too. Which also reminds me, last week, Netflix put out a job posting for a director of generative AI for gaming, paying a brain-breaking $840,000 a year salary. It's likely to replace Mike Verdu, the former VP of Gen AI for games at Netflix who left earlier this year. If Verdu's name sounds familiar, that's because he used to be the head of Netflix's NFT gaming division before it was mothballed after making no games, and the Gen AI for games division was spun up underneath him, carrying over almost none of the staff, naturally. Hey, if I linked to the Checkpoint story from 2024 when he was put in charge of this new studio, will you watch it? Because it's really funny, and I just don't want to accidentally rehash the jokes that I last heard a year ago. Anyway, links in the description. I did promise fandom drama. Technically, I have 3 for you, but it's maybe a generous interpretation of fandom. You'll see. First up, on October 2nd, during one of her fairly regular Sex Ed 101 streams, Anna Valens was hit with a 24-hour suspension from Twitch. Sexual education is perfectly allowed on the streaming service. In fact, it has 2 different carve-outs in the TOS explaining as much, which has led many, including this mutt, to speculate the temporary ban had less to do with any particular thing Miss Valens did, said, or showed, as the entire stream was one of Miss Valens' many VTubing models writing on a large whiteboard in VR chat, and more to do with the topic at hand, sex with trans women. The stream went for 2.25 hours, covering a wide range of topics from what chasers are and why you never want to be one, to the ways that feminizing HRT affect everything in a trans woman's body, from her hair, skin, nerves, to even her dick and cum. If you've been around the Twitch block, or even just the trans women making anything online block, you've probably prepared for the next bit. When Miss Valens appealed the ban, she was told about 50 minutes after the ban took place that a human being had totally watched the entirety of the 2-hour stream and found the ban to be warranted. The VOD's been hosted elsewhere, and I would actually recommend it for any cis folk with a trans partner, cis folk who don't exclude trans women from their dating pool, but haven't necessarily had a trans partner before, or anyone interested in perceiving us as humans. The most important takeaway, however, like most sex ed discussions, is that you have to communicate with your partner. And if that partner is a trans woman, there's a chance that there are some places she won't be comfortable with you touching. That's pretty much it. Also, head scritches aren't a joke. While I am a statistical outlier, I can say from personal experience, on at least one occurrence within the past week, I had 24 climaxes in the space of like 2 or so hours, largely just from head scritches. Again, statistical outlier, but that also was not a joke or hyperbole. Estrogen is wild, y'all. Also in fandom drama, the Swords and Sapphics podcast decided to just go mask off white lady bigotry last week. The podcast, meant to promote small-time authors, has actually been quiet for a little while, but came back to life last week to advertise an itch.io book bundle. At first blush, it was a pretty standard Sapphic self-pub bundle. Some smaller authors, a few more well-established ones like Danny Finn, and a debut author sneaking in, all with the general fantasy theme to match Swords and Sapphics vibe. The issue arose when B, a Thai-cis lesbian and one of the triad of women who make up the pen name Maria Ying, noticed the bundle several of her friends were in and naturally went to go see who else was in it, only to find multiple books with men as perspective characters, including that debut author. For those scratching their heads, let me quickly explain what Sapphic means in reality and what's been happening in romance spaces over the term lately. Sapphic refers to the romantic and sexual feelings felt between non-men for each other. So, a bi-woman is Sapphic. Her relationships with women and NBs are Sapphic. Her relationships with men, however, are not, despite her holistically technically being Sapphic. Get it? It's a word to describe the specific romantic and sexual relationships between non-men, without using language like lesbian that could feel exclusionary to bi women and non-binary folk. However, in slop romance circles, it's quietly become a marketing phrase to attract straight cis women who want to feel progressive while still reading het slop. So you get a lot of sapphic books lately with whole MF sex scenes and a close femme friendship. It's been a personal issue for B for a while now, and to this mutt too. Well, naturally, after B discovered the issue and brought it up with the podcasters, they did something about it, right? Well, yes, they killed the bundle, kicked out every trans woman and most of the NBs, several of whom found out about the drama when they noticed the already rather quiet Swords and Sapphics Discord was no longer available to them, and proceeded to try and defame B. Which is a wild play, given how many times people have tried that over the years, but it turns out it's kind of hard to get a mob stirred up in your defense when everyone can look at the issue and see B was right. So naturally, they started accusing B of race faking, weirdly while implying it was somehow an effort for them to be honest about their own whiteness. Oh, and let's not forget that they also threw out some fun comments about how they're totally not transphobic in the same sentence where they admitted to kicking out all the trans folk in the bundle. This last one is arguably dismissive to call fandom drama, but well, you'll see. After months of slow burn drama, the Bluesky executive board decided to go commit to a full crash out. Personally, I've never seen the development of a Nazi dog whistle happen in real time before, but wow, Jay Graber, the CEO of Bluesky, sure did manage to turn waffles into one in literally 3 days. I'll try and give the Cliff's Notes version of for those who aren't on Bluesky, but the short answer really is no, Bluesky's never really been safer or better than Twitter. It's still run by tech gentry, and they welcome members of the oldest profession, trans women and black folks, when Musk's Twitter takeover was at its most evil, because we're good for driving viewership. We've built basically every social media platform before they kicked us off. They've apparently grown resentful now over having to run a social media site. Bluesky was never, at least according to its owners, supposed to be that, but rather a way of selling the AT protocol, the theoretically decentralized codebase that runs Bluesky. The problem is the protocol mega sucks for being any kind of decentralized tool. There's an article written by Azarjid that I'll link in the description that lays out why the protocol is so much more complex than, say, spinning up a Mastodon instance. Or you could just take a look at the banning of AJ Link, one of the earliest adopters and one of the folks who ran off the Black Sky instance, the only other PDS besides the primary Bluesky base that's even up and running. Link couldn't even be informed of why he was banned because his account was not hosted by Bluesky, so they did not have his email. The claim of decentralization falls apart somewhat when a user whose account isn't even hosted here can be banned without warning, such that even Black Sky users can't access his account either. The crashout started on October 1st, when Jay Graber, the CEO of Bluesky, quoted a post referencing that old Twitter joke about how if you say you like pancakes, someone will come yell at you, assuming you hate waffles, saying, "Too real. We're going to try and fix this. Social media doesn't have to be this way." Again, also sort of punching a hole in the idea that you're not starting a social media network, but whatever. A user asked if they'd ban Jesse Signal yet, a notorious doxer, source of transphobic bigotry and legislation, and a vocal defender of pederasty who joined Blue Sky back during the invite code days before many folks pointed out his actions on and off site were in blatant violation of the TOS. So the TOS was changed to make him less flagrantly, though not in violation of them. Naturally, Jay responded with, all caps, waffles! At 2 in the afternoon the next day, at least MDT, I believe Jay is on the West Coast, but I honestly have no idea, she knuckled down posting a picture of a Belgian waffle, saying, amazing breakfast this morning, I love waffles. And since apparently CEOs have nothing better to do, she, as well as many other executives and high-level policymakers at Blue Sky, started pushing the we didn't make a social media site, we made the AT protocol, so if you don't like it, you can take it and leave angle. Kind of a weird thing to suggest to your audience, who you know are primarily folks who did exactly that at least once already to flee from Twitter. But go off, I suppose. Well, at least until it woke up Signal's dead account into waffle posting. I wish I could say it's been quiet since, but the link ban happened yesterday, while the Asuka Field Labeler, a community moderation tool that marks accounts who've taken part in different forms of bigotry, mostly focused on transphobia, was also temporarily banned. And Jay shared one of the folks trying to spin up a new trans-safe PDS. Weirdly, not North Sky, who are farther along and have been working on this for at least a couple of months, but instead dollspace.gay, who I can't show you because I'm blocked by them. I only bring this up because of the preponderance of evidence that dollspace.gay is in fact a Laura Bailey sock puppet Lorelei Bailey sock puppet. I want to stress, I'm not accusing Jay Graber of knowingly trying to funnel vulnerable trans women into a sectioned off portion of her social network that happens to be run by one of the most abusive and predatory women possible, but that she probably did that by accident because she's blocked by most of the folks who run North Sky, which admittedly also has its own issues, don't worry. Only really online trans women know who Lorelei Bailey is, and many of us don't talk about her much because, like Signal, she name searches herself constantly and loves to attack people with sock puppet accounts. Suffice it to say, she has a history of doing exactly this, making herself the center of a space that's theoretically welcoming to trans women before using her central positioning to begin coercing and abusing those she claims to protect. Oh, so I reiterate, what the hells was this week? I didn't even mention the story about the AI-generated actress and a 63-year-old journalist decision to fixate on her being virginal and bringing that aspect back to Hollywood, because I honestly forgot about it until trying to write my outro. So let's just move on to my schedule. Tonight we are going to be watching some combination of, voted on by the Discord, Porco Rosso, Howl's Moving Castle, and the third Ghibli movie that I can't read from here and can't remember, Spirited Away. I will be basically just streaming nothing but Digimon all this week at 9 a.m. on Thursday and at 4 p.m. on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, though Saturday will still be Tarkov. That's actually kind of it, which is, I think that's pretty much, that's my schedule for this week. Hopefully I'll be able to get some writing done, but, hopefully something ridiculous hasn't happened while I've been live, but I literally found out about new news while doing the pre-show for this, so who knows? Thank you all so very much for joining me. Wrong one. If you're watching this on the stream, don't worry, we're not actually ending. I just am cutting over to here to thank everyone who supports here on Twitch. If you support or like or comment or follow on YouTube, thank you so very much. Right, they call it subscribing on YouTube. Whatever. Thank you very much for all of that. You can also support the work that I do over at patreon.com/Fen, coffee.com/Fen, fen.gay, and over here on Twitch at Fen of Lore. Yeah, my brain is very slightly melting. I have a post-show to do, so hey, if you want to watch that over on Twitch, remember that I do this every Monday morning. Maybe next week I will actually be slightly more prepared. We know that's not true. I didn't have an escape plan, but I have this button, so I'm gonna...